I'm very happy to be here to give this Dharma talk. This is my first one in a big group like this, so a little nervous, but it'll be okay. I want to start with a quote from the Buddha. Once when the Buddha was traveling through a village, this villager came to him and said, "How come you're so radiant? Are you some kind of angel, some sort of God, some kind of saint?" And the Buddha answered simply, "No, I'm awake." So if we want to exude that radiance of joy, all we have to do is be awake. So with this in mind, let's look again at engaged Buddhism. Initially, when I saw the title for this Day of Mindfulness, I was like, oh, is this going to be all about activism? Because that was my perception of engaged Buddhism. But Thai set me straight, because according to Thai, the first meaning of engaged Buddhism is the kind of Buddhism that's present in every moment of our daily life. While you brush your teeth, Buddhism should be there. While you drive your car, Buddhism should be there. While you're walking in the supermarket, Buddhism should be there, so you know what to buy and what not to buy. As a mindfulness practitioner, we have to be aware of what's going on in our body, our feelings, our emotions, and our environment. That is engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism is the kind of Buddhism that responds to what is happening in the here and in the now. Engaged Buddhism means that you practice all day without interruption. We had the opportunity to practice some engaged Buddhism as we went to lunch and ate lunch to be here. And we want to practice all day without interruption in the midst of our family, in the midst of our community, in the midst of our city, in the midst of our society. The way we walk, the way we look, the way we sit can inspire people to live in a way that's peaceful, happy, joyful, and that know that brotherhood is possible in every moment. So what is joy? There's lots of different flavors of joy. There's bliss, rapture, happiness, contentment, ease. But defining joy is kind of difficult. One of the most curious things about joy is it's not that often that it seems like it's caused. Usually we don't say, oh yes, that makes me filled with joy. Joy comes to us in unexpected, unanticipated moments. We know what it's like to feel joy, to feel the delight of being, to feel a celebration of the moment, the joy of being touched by sometimes the simplest things. In Pali, there's really two different words relating to joy. Piti, which is the joy we find when we see water in the dry desert, and sukha, which is the happiness of drinking the water. Now, Pali scholars talk about the two and sometimes interpose which one means happiness and which one means joy. But piti is usually associated with energetic words like exuberance, zest, and enthusiasm, while sukha is designed by quieter terms like agreeable, ease, and comfort. Why is that important? Because Thai says many people think excitement is happiness. But when you're excited, you're not peaceful. True happiness is based on peace. And thus the quote David read at the end of his Dharma talk, while it said peace, it really was about joy and happiness. If you think about it, excitement brings kind of a restlessness and a contractedness. The joy that results from curiosity is smoother and more open. Joy arises from being attentive and from being curious. Excitement, on the other hand, requires something to happen to us or for us to procure something. So I think that determining whether it's happiness or joy is the feeling is not that important. And throughout this Dharma talk, I will probably use happiness and joy interchangeably. I think, at least for the purpose of this talk, what's most important is, where does the joy or happiness come from? Does it come from external conditions? Or are we happy for no reason? As we grow to understand our happiness mental states, we become aware that happiness does not need to be dependent on our materialistic possessions or our pursuits. We become aware that happiness can happen without anything. Joy, the celebration of life, comes alive when we let ourselves be open to what is. With mindfulness, happiness becomes a choice rather than dependent on a set of perfect external conditions. External happiness arises from causes and conditions, and it goes away with causes and conditions. Happiness for no reason is celebrating the life that's here, regardless of the conditions, without being dependent on things being a certain way. So happiness and joy are really impermanent. So if we want happiness and joy from external conditions, and there's nothing wrong with that, we just can't be attached to it. William Blake understood this beautifully. He wrote, "He who binds himself to a joy doth the wing's life destroy. But he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." Eknath Eswarian, a spiritual teacher, says, "What we usually try to do is capture any joy that comes our way before it can escape. We have our butterfly net and go after the joy like a hunter stalking its prey. We hide and wait, pounce on it, catch it, and take it home to put it on our wall. When our friends come to visit, we say, 'Hey, Stu, would you like to see my joy?' There it is on the wall, dead." We try to cling to pleasure, but all we succeed in doing is making ourselves frustrated, because whatever it promises, pleasure simply can't last. But if I'm willing to kiss the joy as it flies, if I say, "Yes, this is a beautiful moment," I won't grab it, I'll just let it be, then we have joy. So wise effort is really learning to savor the joyful moment without clinging to it. Sometimes we confuse pleasantness and cravings for happiness. We can have a pleasant feeling without being happy. Sometimes revenge is a pleasant feeling, but it doesn't bring us happiness. And craving, dreaming about getting something that you want, that also feels like happiness. But craving has an entangling aftertaste that happiness doesn't have. Happiness occurs in our wholesome moments, so we can increase the occurrence of happiness by watering our positive seeds and taking skillful actions. Negative mindsets tend to increase unpleasant feelings, which in turn trigger unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome actions, thus reducing our likelihood for happiness. A mind that's in a state of joy is predisposed to notice that's beautiful, wholesome, pleasant. At the same time, it's going to disregard that which is unpleasant. You ever notice that? When you're in a good mood, everything's wonderful, and when you're in a bad mood, you see the problems with everything. You see that the glass is half full, empty instead of half full. So we really want to cultivate the positive mind states. But we often think, I can't be happy right now. I will be happy sometime in the future. Ty says we believe happiness is possible only in the future. That's why we practice, I have arrived. That's so important, to practice, I have arrived. The conditions for our happiness are already here. We only need to allow ourselves to be in the present moment, and we'll be able to touch them. We come into unconditional presence. So one of the practices I've been doing for the last 5 years or so to bring myself into unconditional presence is something called taking in the good. Every morning when I go out to get the newspaper, I look around and I spend 20 seconds taking in the good. Sometimes it takes me more than 20 seconds to find something good, especially if it's a gray day. But I'll find something, whether it's the cool breeze on my face, the sound of the bird, the beautiful tree, some color in the sky, even just the green of the grass, and I'll savor it for a full 20 seconds. And it brings me totally into the present moment each day. And I've noticed that after I got in the habit of doing that I'm doing it more and more throughout the day and seeing things I never saw before. Sometimes our joy is the source of our smile, but sometimes our smile is the source of our joy. And that's why Thai tells us that we should practice mouth yoga. So let's try it. Invite you to sit in a comfortable position and just close your eyes. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Breathing in, I feel the smile in my mouth. Breathing out, I feel the joy. Breathing out, I expand the smile all the way up to my eyes. Breathing out, I feel the joy. Breathing in, feel the joy that comes from your smile. Breathing out, savor the joy. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I don't even need to ask if we felt the joy, because I could look around the room and see joy in all of the faces, or almost all of the faces. Sometimes we're not in a place where we can feel joy, and that's okay too. We can still condition our happiness muscle. When happiness is already manifesting, we have to continue to nourish it. Thai says we can condition our bodies and minds to happiness with the 5 practices of letting go, inviting positive seeds, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. But for myself, I found that I couldn't do any of those 5 until I did one other thing, and that's slowing down. Most of my life, and probably many of you, most of your life, we lean forward on our way somewhere else. I know I spent at least the first 50 years of my life planning the future and missed out on a lot of the heres and the nows. So we don't notice the joy in the moment because we're too busy. I'd like to tell a little story. There's a man who sat at a metro station in Washington, D.C., and he started to play the violin. It was a cold January morning. He played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, since it was rush hour, it was about 1,100 people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. In the 45 minutes the musician played, only 6 people stopped and stayed for a while. The one who paid the most attention was a 3-year-old boy. His mother tagged him hard, hurried, but the kid stopped to look at the violinist. Finally, the mother pushed hard, and the child continued to walk, turning his head all the time. This action was repeated by several other children. All the parents, without exception, forced them to move on. About 20 gave him money, but continued to walk at their normal pace. He collected $32. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the most talented musicians in the world. He had just played one of the most intricate pieces ever written on a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before playing on the subway, Joshua Bell sold out of the theater in Boston where the seats averaged $100. This is a real story. Joshua Bell, playing incognito in the metro station, was organized by the Washington Post as kind of a social experiment. And what I get out of it is if we don't have a moment to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world playing the best music ever written, how many other things are we missing in our lives? So I myself have a real need to slow down. Before I started meditating, I operated at 2 speeds, 100 miles an hour and fast asleep. I'm finding some other speeds in between there. And it's really important because if I don't slow down, I don't see the joys in life. I miss them. So once I've slowed down, I can start with the first method that Thai says to cultivate joy, and that's letting go. He says, creating joy and happiness is to cast off, to leave behind. There's a kind of joy that comes from letting go. You know, the feeling of when you clean out your closet. Many of us are bound to so many things, and we think these things are necessary for our survival, for our happiness. But these things, or more precisely, our belief about their utter necessity, often are obstacles to our joy and our happiness. So sometimes you think that having a certain career, getting a diploma, buying a house, having a relationship is going to bring you happiness and that you can't live without it. And then you get what you wanted and you're still not happy. Now you're worried about losing it. And so you can't live with it and you can't live without it. But Thai says if you come to look deeply at your fearful attachment, you'll realize, in fact, that that's really the obstacle to your happiness. You have the capacity to let it go. It takes a lot of courage. But once you let it go, happiness comes quickly, and you won't have to go around searching for it. So I'm going to talk about a habit that I recently gave up, let go, to give you an idea of how the process worked for me. So I recently let go of my Diet Pepsi habit. It was a habit every day I had to have a Diet Pepsi at lunch. And for years I tried to use willpower to give it up, but the craving was too strong. So finally I decided I would try mindfulness. And so what I did was I would feel the craving coming up. I would pay attention to where I was feeling it and what it felt like when the craving came up so I could recognize it before it got too strong. And I would think about what need is this craving really filling? And you'd never think Diet Pepsi could fill a need for belonging, but that was the craving. When I was a kid, I was 5th out of 10, but I was one of the little kids. And the little kids didn't get to stay up at night and have POP. And so I thought about that, and I thought, okay, this is what the need is. And so I mindfully, every time I had a Diet Pepsi, I would give in to the craving, but I would pay attention to how it tasted and how it made me feel. In the first few sips were always so great, I was like, this is never going to work because it tastes so good. But then after the first few sips, it was just okay. And I kept trying to pay attention to how it tasted, how I felt. And I also paid attention to the fact that when I had a Diet Pepsi at lunch at work, I'd be sitting in the next meeting really anxious for it to end so I could go to the bathroom, because that's what Diet Pepsi does to me. And that meant that I didn't chat with my coworkers after the meeting because I had to rush out to the bathroom. So in effect, when I was really being mindful about it, I realized that really backfired on my need for belonging because I didn't connect with coworkers because I was running to the bathroom. So instead of making me happy, Diet Pepsi was actually an obstacle to my feeling of belonging, and it also was causing anxiety. When's this meeting going to end? I have to go. So letting go really takes a lot of mindfulness, and it takes looking deeply, and that's some of the other things that we'll be getting to. Another habit that I'm trying to let go of is brushing anything unpleasant under the carpet. And David talked a lot about this, how we have to turn towards suffering. I can tell you my mother was the queen of brushing things under the carpet, and she passed that trait along to me. It takes a lot of energy to keep things hidden. And I finally realized if I can't feel the 10,000 sorrows, I'm not really feeling the 10,000 joys either. I used to think when I first started meditating, the first couple years, and maybe even more than the first couple years, I thought it was really stupid that you would sit there when you were uncomfortable and not move and get into a more comfortable position, or not scratch an itch. It just made no sense to me. But then I realized that I have like zero tolerance for discomfort, and that if I can sit with my discomfort through meditating, I won't be so apt to turn away from discomfort. I hate to say it, David, but I'm one of those high school girls when it comes to suffering, because I go, ooh, and I turn away. I walk out of the room if there's some suffering on television or violence. So I need to build up that muscle build up my window of tolerance for having discomfort. There's a couple other things of letting go that Tara Brach talks about. There's two different thoughts that she talks about. The first one is something is missing. When we think something's missing, we have if only mind. If only the wind was not so strong when we were down in Florida walking on the beach, it would have been better. If only the sun was shining today, I would be happy. If only I could have some chocolate right now. If only, if only, if only. But when we're when we have if only mind, we're all leaning forward. We're not in the present moment, the one place that we need to be if we want to be happy. The other thought to let go of is something's wrong. It may be something's wrong with the world. We listen to the news and we blame all sorts of people. Something's wrong, this is terrible. Or it may be, and more often in my case, it's something's wrong with me. We feel like we're not enough, so we can't love life. Did you ever have something really good happen to you and you feel guilty that you got that and feel like you really don't deserve it? So instead of enjoying it and being joyful, you're feeling guilty? So growing up, my mother always told me, first you do the work and then you play. That's another thought I have to give up, because when I was a kid that worked. You had so much homework and then you could go play. As an adult, the work is never done. It's always there. And so I don't allow myself to just play. Walt and I were just on vacation, and on Thursday he went to return the car. And when he got back, he called me because I wasn't sitting down by the pool where he expected me to be sitting, enjoying myself. Guess where I was? Up in the room working on my Dharma talk, because otherwise it wouldn't be good enough. And so you really want to try and pay attention to, do I really have to do this one next thing? Is that truly going to make me happy? Or is that really getting in the way of me enjoying life and being happy? So the second one, the second method Ty mentions is positive seeds, inviting our positive seeds. And if we want to cultivate joy without a foundation of right view, we're going to risk watering the wrong seeds. So we really need to start with watering, or with the right view. And sometimes our views are not very clearly formulated in our mind. But it doesn't matter whether our views are formulated or not. They still are going to have a far-reaching influence. So it's important that we take the time to stop and understand what our views are, because they influence our perceptions, our values, the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world. Actually, our views influence what seeds we're going to water. Ty says we're caught up in our perceptions, and this is not wise. We have to be objective and touch all aspects of reality. And we mustn't allow one aspect from preventing us from seeing the whole picture. So we start with right view, and that helps us go to right intention, so we can align our values with the life we want to lead. Because wise intention is selectively watering seeds, and it takes intention to turn toward happiness. Henry Nouwen said, "Joy does not simply happen to us. We have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day." The next that Ty talks about is mindfulness-based joy. When Ty was a young monk, he wondered why the Buddha kept practicing mindfulness and meditation after he was already a Buddha. But he finds the answer is plain, because happiness is impermanent. It needs to be nourished, just like everything else. So with mindfulness, we can choose the appropriate response and water the wholesome seeds. Because without mindfulness, whatever's in our mind is going to be the action that we take. So if we have wholesome thoughts in our mind, we'll have wholesome speech and actions. If we have unwholesome thoughts in our mind, we'll have unwholesome speech and actions. And those unwholesome speech and actions don't tend to make us happy. So we want to practice mindful breathing, mindful walking, and come back and let ourselves be in the present moment, so we can see all the conditions we have to be happy. Mindfulness is an energy that you can generate all day long. When you eat your breakfast, when you're walking outside, you can view the beautiful sky and trees. Mindfulness is like the sunlight, according to Ty. It gives us the energy we need for being happy. Concentration is born from mindfulness, and it has the power to break through, to burn away the afflictions that make you suffer, and to allow joy and happiness to come in. To stay in the present moment takes concentration, and that's why we practice meditation, to learn how to stay in the present moment. And with concentration comes insight. We often recognize we have tension in our body and we want to release it, but sometimes we can't. What we need is some insight. We're like a fish who's been caught once and knows there's a hook inside the bait. If the fish makes use of that insight, he won't bite because he knows he'll get caught by the hook. But I'll tell you, I keep biting on that hook. So it requires that we come home to ourselves, that we make peace with our suffering, that we treat it tenderly, and we look deeply at the roots of our pain. And it also requires that we nourish happiness daily, having understanding and compassion for ourselves and for those around us. With each breath, we ease suffering and generate joy. With each step, the flower of insight blooms.